Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm honored to introduce you all to medical and child abuse survivor and whistleblower, survivor advocate, former disco girl, health and wellness extraordinaire, educator on mental, physical, and spiritual fitness, content creator and podcast host, Substack writer, incredible warrior, and my new friend, Catherine Waters. Prepare to be inspired and uplifted today by today's extraordinary show as our fearless guest, Catherine, who I will be referring to as Kat, fearlessly intertwines two seemingly unrelated topics: society's waning focus on health and fitness, and the alarming surge of child abuse and trauma, revealing their profound and unexpected connections. This groundbreaking episode springs forth from the depths of Kat's own harrowing journey, having emerged from the depths of an abusive and dysfunctional childhood home. There, her cries for help were met with dismissal, gaslighting, and an exacerbation of her suffering, a mere glimpse into the profound revelations that she will be sharing with us today. Kat will unflinchingly expose what she terms the criminalization of mental and physical health and healthy adverse responses to the sick system, shining a blazing light on our natural, healthy responses to a deeply flawed system. Brace yourself for an epiphany. Health and fitness are not mere accessories for our lives, but the very foundation upon which we stand, from the tender years of childhood through the fullness of adulthood. Too often overlooked in discussions about abuse and trauma, the mental, physical, and spiritual vitality of ourselves and those who help shape us in our lives, people like our parents and other influential adult figures, silently sculpt our past, present, and future. When neglected, this vitality can rob us of our inherent strength, forging a legacy of generational trauma that molds children into wounded adults destined to perpetuate the cycle. Yet Kat offers a beacon of hope, shining a light on how the transformative power of fitness on all levels can become our sword and shield, breaking the chains of trauma and reclaiming our sovereignty from those who would commodify our pain. Kat stands as a relentless warrior, not only for survivors of medical abuse, but for all who bear the scars of adversity. With a voice that thunders and a heart that heals, she champions the wounded warriors among us, a radiant force in a world plagued by spiritual malaise. Unapologetically, she disrupts the secure establishment, exposing its insidious agendas that impoverish us mentally, physically, and spiritually, only to profit from our trauma as though it were a mere product to exploit, rather than a profound societal wound demanding compassion and justice. Today, Kat invites us to rise, to heal, and to reclaim our power in this revelatory and soul-stirring episode. So you guys, let's dive in. Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guest, I'd like to share just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, sharing any information privately with me, or submitting a written testimony for my upcoming book series, or to be featured on a Substack article, please reach out via email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. Additionally, I've teamed up with a couple of my favorite brands to offer you guys exclusive discount codes on products I love, such as Rife Technology Frequency Machines and CZTL's Premium Methylene Blue. You can find all the relevant links and codes, along with other resources, in the show notes. Your support across all platforms is greatly appreciated, especially as I've had to shift to alternative streaming platforms such as Rumble and X, following the termination of my former YouTube channel. I've just started a new YouTube channel you can subscribe to at the handle @Imagination Podcast Official that I will be rebuilding as well. This transition to multiple platforms is crucial to continue sharing the vital information with the public and disclosure communities. Thank you all wholeheartedly for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me. So, you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, voice for the voiceless, walking miracle, content creator, survivor, and anti-child abuse and medical abuse advocate, medical abuse whistleblower, and a woman on a mission to empower the world to get fit mentally, physically, and spiritually, so we can stop abusive cycles in their tracks once and for all. The one, the only, Catherine Waters. Catherine, thank you so much for being here today. What an honor to have you on.
Emma, thank you so much for having me. When I saw, you had Jamie J on, because I know Jamie for a few years now, and we did so many recordings together, because she's like right there with me on psych and abuse, child abuse, SRA stuff. So that was like kind of a good of a headway, to like connect me to you. So thank you so much.
You are so welcome. You're such a powerful voice out there. And, just like Jamie, you could be doing anything with your time. You were in the fitness industry for many, many years and have a great understanding of this, and it takes a lot of courage to stand against the corruption that we see both in industries like fitness, like medicine, and, SRA and all these different abuses that are circulating as a result of all this dysfunction, So what you talk about is really important. And I'm really honored to have you on. And I know that you have a testimony yourself. This wasn't just something that you became interested in as an adult. All of this interest and this passion that you have to talk about this actually started in your childhood. So I thought maybe we'd start by introducing you and giving some background information on your childhood and sort of your path into health, wellness, and physical, mental, and spiritual fitness.
Yep. I do say it like quite often. I have it, pretty summarized by now. And I kind of I think people get tired of hearing me saying it since the 70s. But it literally is the truth. And I just kind of, I guess, got woken up fairly early to, just like the amazing power of of this, like of the mind, body, and its adverse responses to the unhealthy environments that are literally being, crammed down our throats, and how it was my healthy body's rightful adverse responses to the unhealthy, dysfunctional, and abusive, not just family system, but the, larger community. And I didn't expect it to just keep kind of expanding so vastly and so, unfortunately, like it's literally like 55 years. I just speak all the truth, so it was about the age of 6 years old in 1970 where my body really started having clear health effects from a very, you weren't wanted essentially, in the, the environment that you were born into. And, so I basically got caught in this, being pinned against, what my body knew, what you could see, what you're experiencing, what is real. And all through the 70s, basically everyone, even neighbors, they were all always trying to tell me not to listen to my own body, what what you feel like. And everyone was just always minimizing. I mean, because everything that you as a young person are doing is you're just making everyone ridiculously uncomfortable. Your body's responses are just exposing like all of this, these issues that need to be addressed. And there's literally like not one true healthy and fit adult really anywhere. And, I know, like, I mean, right away, because I'm so used to saying this stuff, and you're really not allowed to say it. Like, you're just like not allowed to expose any of this stuff. You're not allowed to, criticize and give, the healthy feedback. So, like, as I got to be older, again, the late 70s, when I was like 16 or so in 19 1980. So, the older I was getting, of course, you're being shaped by your environment. And it was only my one uh abuser at the time, because the other one left. It was divorced at, at a young age. And so, you know, like, my body was basically my mind body, I like to say, would just continue to have more intense adverse responses. And then, like, the more your body is the one that the abuser and everyone else are making wrong, right? The more your uh mind body are just going to kind of double down and keep pushing back, because the people in authority basically have the attitude that, hey, I got the power, I could do whatever I want. um like, what I say goes. And I mean, even though, like, here's the laws of physics and nature and health, like, completely exposing these people as the total frauds that they are. I mean, it's kind of easy for me to like laugh a little bit about it now, because it just like was like, um it's so simple, and it's so easy to, for people to be exposed as the frauds that they are. But, like, no matter how clearly people in authority were being exposed as just completely illegitimate, they would always be the ones who would get excused, who would get enabled, who would get propped up, who would get, like, because they're in the position of, power. So they're just kind of automatically in the right, and you're the subordinate with no rights, and you're just automatically wrong. And, I just give literally all the credit to, like, this and this, and the way that it responded. And it was so it was basically like, and it's the same thing today. I mean, it's just going on a mass scale. It's been happening all through the decades. This, like, and more people are talking about it, thank goodness. Since, like, I mean, there's so many events, 9/11, or I was always, that's when I kind of started documenting things, was when Occupy Wall Street started, is when I started with this little rinky-dink digital camera, and I just started filming all of the Occupy Wall Street, because it was like the first time on a mass scale that I like, people were kind of starting to sound like me. So think about it. It's like, I mean, also, all through the decades, because I spent my whole life, uh you know working out, like, fitness really did, just help to ground me. I started basically doing just like calisthenics in my room upstairs, kind of jogging around the neighborhood, doing leg lifts and stuff. And then by 1983, I was 19 years old. I started going to this gym, and I literally lifted like heavy amounts of weights, because it was the I could just like say so much about this stuff. It was the visceral feeling that lifting weights gave me. It was kind of one of the most honest relationships I ever had with anything. It provided, just something secure and sturdy to push off of, so that you were actually getting more of like a true mirroring back from it. Like, the laws of physics are not lying when you're exercising. And another way that exercising helped so much was because people would say that they, I mean, it's again, it's just so incredible how micro of the macro it all was, back then. They would try to say, and sorry, I just wanted to interject and say that the reason I call the podcast that I do on revolution.radio, Studio B, I call it the family industrial complex, because I want to include the family system as the, like, it's like a mini corporation essentially, because people used to try to say, well, the abusers used to try to say that abuse was good for you, that it, quote unquote, built character. But of course, it was always my own mind body that was like, I don't think so, because what, like, it was clearly you were being harmed. And like, maybe it's like adverse responses or challenges outside, when you have this insulated, what's supposed to be a you're supposed to have refuge, you're supposed to have sanctuary in the family environment, especially when you're a kid. So again, the weights really, uh I went to it in order to, again, viscerally feel and know for myself exactly where that line is drawn between building yourself up and ripping yourself down. And because what everyone else was doing was clearly like, I used to call in the 70s, I used to call the environment that I lived in a ripping into the muscle and bone environment, like not a building environment at all. And so like just always kind of listening to what my body said. And so it was always like the right amount of stress or weight that you put on yourself, with for the right amount of duration, and listening to the body is like, that's what helps you to grow. And also psychologically too, I mean, children are supposed to have the right amount of stresses, put on them at, various stages of their development. I mean, that's, nature isn't stupid. Like, God isn't stupid. I mean, he knew what he was doing. And I mean, it was, so obvious, that, I mean, again, I didn't know that it, like, how bad, like this problem just turned out to be over the decades, because I mean, I was really hopeful, and I was really naive and idealistic. And I completely believed by the 80s, because I also learned yoga practice in the 80s. I used to go at the the women's gym that I went to in Brooklyn. I grew up in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, right up the block from the hardware store where they filmed Saturday Night Fever in 1977. So, there's a little bit of trivia about that too. But anyway, so I used to go to this all-female gym. I had to take the bus to it. And the yoga teacher that was there, and we used to kind of have like every other Friday, I think it was, like, meditation, like chanting and all of this stuff, like in the early 80s. And for some reason, though, I really did gravitate more to like heavy weight lifting. And I also really was into like heavy metal music as well. And when I was like 17 years old, I started working at the time, was like one of the most literal famous heavy metal clubs in the world, and it was called L'Amour, the rock capital of Brooklyn, where Metallica played there in, I don't know, it was either 1983 or 1984. They played there like 3 nights in a row. And because it was like the empowerment of this music, And I used to always try to say to people all throughout the decades, that we need to embrace our healthy dark sides. It was really, I gotta say, it was really, really challenging through the 80s, especially because I was always the one, I had no one else on my side. I was like completely alone. And everyone around me was like really trying to convince me that like there was something wrong with me and how my healthy adverse responses were wrong. I mean, like for society, for family, for community to be taking a young person, it's and I know this stuff is just not easy to face. It's really not pleasant things to face. But like the family and community were literally the exact opposite. They were doing exactly the opposite, functioning inverted from how, true, real, healthy family systems and um communities and relatives, are supposed to function. And, for me to just kind of be left like 100% on my own and everyone kind of shaming me, and like people just wanted nothing more than to just shut you up, like they just wanted you to shut the hell up. They like kick the deck can down the road, sweep everything under the rug, let it go. And I looking back can somewhat, maybe just a little bit, it's like see how people could, they where they get this mentality, but yet at the same time, um so it's as if like everyone was coming from this kind of mentality, which I heard a lot of, like America is such a great country, like we're the best country in the world. And they really believed that. And they really believed that, this is like the land of opportunity and all this stuff, which at one time, maybe, in the 50s, I don't know when, but I never experienced it ever. And that, you should have no problem just sort of like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. But at the same time, you know children need what they need, and you could like literally feel this war between like the man-made, like maybe I guess, I hesitate to use the word capitalist system, um I don't know, for profit system versus just like, the natural world and your health. And it was truly like a clear case of like your development being completely just genetically modified, and then they couldn't wait to throw you out into the world and just get a job. And I used to think to myself, I mean, I'm supposed to take this like 100% undermining, robbing, mangling of your health. Because I mean, I'm just honest and I say, like, my health suffered really bad. And I'm gonna do my best, like, not to get like choked up or anything.
If
Um,
you do.
but like I'm good. I really want to try not to. But so unfortunately, I from the second through the fifth grade, I had like no eyelashes because I used to pull them out from stress. And I used to have like these, self-mutilation habits that I kind of really did like on and off. it kind of got better over time, but at the same time, and I really did suffer excruciatingly, like emotional pain, like really. um I would just like have episodes like on this, the New York City subway, and just being in some back room at the gym, or and some job, and just be like crying and sobbing. And so one key thing that I think is like something that must be mentioned. So, by the end of the 70s into the early 80s, when you're getting stronger, and the abuser can't bully you anymore, and they don't even realize that they turned you into this person that can now really fight them back. And again, I'm just like 100% honest. I wanted to, and literally could have, like, killed this person. I wanted to really, really badly. Um, and like the amount of rage and frustration that was being literally pumped into my mind body was, I mean, it's kind of hard to describe. Um, And I kind of just thought of something to say too. So I'm just going to kind of go back to 1972 and talk about this horrible, dark experience like that I just had in the upstairs room. Um, the movie Carrie, the original Carrie movie from the 1970s, reminded me and my mother, I have to say, sort of, when I saw that movie. And the house even looked like the house that I grew up in, and it had the two little windows at the top, and that was my room. And I was in that room, and I just had this experience of being kind of enveloped by like this dark ghost entity type. I'll never forget it. And I knew that I was never going to be like the healthy, creative, person that I was put on this earth to be. And I just spent my life like doing everything I could, trying to stay ahead of. I was really creative when I was young in the 70s and 80s. I really wanted to do like performing arts type stuff, dancing. I kind of went from like disco to heavy metal. Um, anyway, and I really wanted to sing, and I used to draw a lot, and I just kind of it was being told, and then the rug, when the people around me added rather than alleviated, because I like all I did when I was young was just look for sanctuary, was look for refuge, was look for validation or mirroring, or just someone to be on my side. I didn't care who it was. I didn't even care like if my parents couldn't take care of me the way that I needed, like I didn't care if, as long as somebody did. But I never ever did find anyone. And I used to kind of, again, intuitively know inside, that the more time that went by, that I was not able to find someone to at least fill in where, the job that your parents couldn't do. Then that nature doesn't screw around, and that window would close, and then like everything would just be kind of solidified. And again, I never was able to find anyone. And I mean, so I also wanted to mention as well that in the 70s, again, like just due to your body being so incredibly healthy, and like knock on wood, I mean, I had like measles, mumps, rubella, stuff. Maybe the food would, was not as poisoned back then, so like I really intuitively knew in like the mid 70s, or again around like the time, Saturday Night Fever came out, because I saw that movie literally like over 100 times, easy. And that, we're here to self-actualize, like we're supposed to be getting raised to reach our healthy potential, and be, like the authentic healthy person that we're supposed to be in this world. Like my body just kind of instinctively knew that. And then, again, like the more time that went by, like people all around me, friends, again, cousins, and they would all kind of act like everything was fine, like they were all okay. I grew up working class. My father was a bus driver. My parents were divorced because there was domestic violence. They only got married because my mother was pregnant and it was against the Catholic Church to have an abortion. And you weren't wanted, and you knew it. So it was like be glad you weren't aborted, like don't expect me to actually raise you to your healthy potential. And and it's just really sad. It's just like, so when I learned, about SRA, and I learned about the Franklin Credit Union scandal before Jeffrey Epstein. And and I'm trying, I learned everything. I dotted all the I's, I crossed all the T's. I was right. I lived things. And when the people around you who are supposed to be championing you, I speak about John Bradshaw a lot. I loved John Bradshaw in the 80s into the early 90s. Um, I thought he was like one of the greatest things, and I thought we were saved when I discovered him. Um, champ, like, like it's all math. It's just like all science. Like this is science. Like children need their needs met when they're young. They need physical needs met, right. It's not just food, shelter. They need their emotional needs met. They need their spiritual needs met. And when you're surrounded by people like all around who are basically just taking, health and fitness and just bringing it down here and making it normal, that we're here to just kind of have a job and just pay your bills and have some kids. And I was like, oh my God, like I was scrambling. Like I can't even, the things that I did all through the course of my life trying to um raise the bar. So I became just so like incredibly obsessed with fitness and how a healthy family system is supposed to function, and to just say, it's, we're supposed to be functioning up at this level and we're all the way down here, just to give people an idea, to help people get oriented, that like admit that we're here, and then we can at least just start moving in this direction. I didn't think that was so radical. I didn't think that was so hard. But, all people did again was deny reality. They made all the dysfunction and abuse normal. Like I knew, oh, at such a young age. Again, it was somewhere in the late 80s or the early, oh, sorry, late 70s, early 80s, that, even like, friends, were trying to basically, other relatives around me. I had one older brother that's 16 months older than me. And like I knew I was being trained essentially to just fund my abuser. And I give credit. The reason why I wanted to, talk about like the rage and frustration that was being pumped into me. Like was extraordinarily angry, like ridiculously angry, and rightfully so. And I give the credit to that anger for really it helped me to dot the i's, cross the t's, do the math, and I just kept doing the math. And no matter how right I was, it just never mattered to the people around me. Like, they would just keep jerking that rug out from under you over and over and over and over again. So it was like, what, like, so the laws of fitness, I mean, like the laws of nature, the laws of physics, natural law, science, like, doesn't matter, you know and so I find it ironic during the jab and everybody starts talking about follow the science. I was like, people didn't want to know, you know doodly squat from freaking science when, the science of child abuse was exposing all of them as, and again, like, it's not about like finger pointing or any of that stuff. It's just about accepting the math, accepting, the science of child abuse. I mean, I spent decades like my whole life. And I'm like, what in the hell is going on? Like, why is it so hard to get people to understand that if people don't get their healthy needs met when they're children, they're going to have lasting health problems, down the road when they're older, and like, nobody wanted to hear this stuff, and even about themselves, because, and another thing that was becoming painfully obvious again, like by the late 70s into the early 80s, and I started to say, the people around me, like my friends and, even my sibling, they might not have gotten the torture, because it literally was like, I equate it now, what I lived, as like a black site, literal straight up torture. Anytime you're trapped in an environment where, your body's healthy adverse responses are basically being used to torture you, rather than, the people around you are supposed to be listening and gauging and adjusting their behavior by your body's healthy adverse responses. And instead they're like, oh, well, I got the power, I don't have to do anything to adjust myself except just, come down harder on you. And so it was just this endless cycle. And and it was so obvious that the abuser was just basically at war with, the laws of nature and health, essentially. Um and and then when the like all through the decades, it was so obvious again, like this macro of the micro that I was talking about. um Things like the bank bailout of '08, 9/11, so yeah, I'm trying to, like, just, the order, like, I'm just trying to kind of keep things like going chronologically. um let's see. So, I was always really determined. I mean, I was fighting like crazy. I mean, I was resisting, and I was not going to back down. And it was again because of all the rage and just grit and all the heavy weightlifting that I did. And I knew that I was right, and I was not going to give in. And I watched people all, I mean, I swear to God, I feel like I predicted the things that are happening today. I swear I saw. I mean, I could say that I saw them coming decades ago, but of course I didn't think, um I really didn't think people would let things get to the point that they have gotten to. But I watched, um I watched people's habits. I saw people's habits, and I saw the war against health. I saw the war people had against their own health, and that they weren't self-actualized. And I knew, I don't know, it was just like an intuitive thing none of us were raised, you know, to be the authentic person that we were supposed to be. And yet, you know, everyone just gets pushed out. All they really care about is, you know, getting a job and making money. And I was determined, because you know, like I was never raised, like no one ever gave to me. So I was kind of always like looking and knowing, you know, I need to build my health up and repair and defend what was left of my health. Because if I go out into the world and just worry about just having money, I'm just going to be basically stuck at this like plateau, you know, for the rest of my life. And I worked as hard as I could to try to, um, you know, build myself so that, you know, once you start getting a job, like I was determined to make money being who I was, being the authentic person that I was. I knew that we needed this, you know, I was calling it like a social biodiversity. Like if we don't defend who we authentically are, because you know, I just saw people doing all of this stuff, and it used to literally scare the living hell out of me, because my people around me, who all they cared about was money, and I would watch people not care about being authentic, not care about being, you know, having their own voice. And so they would go out and, you know, work on Wall Street, um, you know, work for corporations and institutions that were already like, you know, huge. And, you know, all you're doing is helping these companies get larger, you know, at your own expense. And I would always kind of take the study that I did of the family system, and then, you know, into the 80s, I started applying it to the work environment as well. And I would think to myself, you know, like, well, when do you ever get raised? You know, because like once, like you never, like no one ever gets raised. Like even when they go to the work environment and they're basically just, they stay down here. You know, you like, you know, so the family system is abusive and dysfunctional, and then the work environment is abusive and dysfunctional, and you're supposed to just be at this work environment. And you know, my mother actually used to kind of admit this stuff too, that she used to just go through motions for a paycheck. And I thought it was just incredibly blatantly unhealthy. And like everything was just, the war against health and nature was so obvious. And I just couldn't understand what was wrong with people and how they could go along with this stuff all these decades. And I knew, don't sacrifice your authentic self, you know? And, you know, I thought this system, you know, was healthier, and I thought more people would kind of understood this. And I thought more people were doing what I was doing. I really 100% believed that there were a lot more people who would not sell out for the paycheck. Um, so I did personal training in the 80s. There was no such thing as personal training certifications or anything like that back then. All that stuff just became money making stuff. Um, you know, and like I was determined to get money saying what I wanted to say. Like and then like I kind of made an experiment. I made like life an experiment, I guess, starting somewhere in like the maybe like the mid 80s. It's kind of hard to remember sometime that. And you know, and I started questioning the monetary system, because it was so obvious. Like I was always being told to shut up. You know, you know, being shut up, you had to shut up just to have a place to live. Um And so I was like, am I supposed to just do this for the rest of my life? Just to have a roof over your head, just to have a job to pay for a roof over your head? Do I have to just have a job and keep my mouth shut for the rest of my life? And I'm like, wait a minute, like, our government should want us to be self-actualized. Like, doesn't our government want its citizens to be healthy and strong? You know, it was just like, come on, people. Anyway, so I made an experiment with the monetary system because every single time I tried to have a job doing what I wanted to do, saying what I wanted to say, like, because I was already being criminalized for a long time for saying the things that I was saying. So it was very like, slamming your foot on the accelerator, slamming your foot on the brake kind of thing, whiplash. Um, I was never like matter of factly kind of able to just say any of this stuff. It was very, just jerky. Um, and so like I said that I'm going to, no matter what happens, put being, authentic and self-actualized first. And if the monetary system was legitimate, it should come, like money should come from me saying the right thing, getting the science right, So this was just all like how I was, kind of putting this, like, society to this test. And it kept being exposed over and over again. And again, I didn't expect it to be this bad. I really, really, really thought, because in the 80s there was a lot of, self-help books. Again, this is like before Amazon. You used to just go to a bookstore and the bookshelves would be lined with, self-help books and all the books on the family system, John Bradshaw, Melody Beattie, Codependent No More, and um oh, what's her face, Louise Hay. And there was a lot of that, enlightenment stuff. And I read so many books. It's like on healing and recovery. But again, what started to become like apparent, unfortunately, through the decades, um, because one thing that started to become painfully obvious, so I made it through Brooklyn College with a bachelor's in psych. And then, of course, what else do you do? You want to kind of be a therapist, and study psych and do all kinds of counseling and stuff. But then I would have had to get into a lot of debt. And it was just so many flags got raised, like, and and it was always that resistance. Like, I had a lot of resistance, and I was just, it was, to me, it was normal for me to, I always challenged authority all the time. Like, I mean, I want to go put my, go like this, I was really determined to, I mean, because I got so beat up a lot, I mean, there was nobody else on my side. And it really was that anger that I, it was there. Like, I had like, I guess, like a kind of a small bank account or a large bank account, I don't know, of just like fight, you know. And so, okay, I don't want to lose my train of thought now. So yeah, like by the time, so this is now like kind of the early 90s, when you're like, what else am I going to do if I don't like study, psych and become like a therapist. Like I always wanted to be like kind of like a marriage counselor. Like I was reading all the books on healthy relationship skills, active listening techniques. Barbara DeAngelis came around in the early 90s. With I still have it. I still have 1994 Barbara DeAngelis's Making Love Work program. Like this is how old this stuff is. It came with VHS tapes, cassette tapes, and a workbook, you know. But again, and it was all about like, making the leap, taking leaps in life and all this stuff. And oh God, I but one thing that was kind of sad that I started to notice was there was no justice. Like there was no accountability. Nobody was ever calling for any accountability. So the abusers just get away with it. They have impunity. And this is where the family industrial complex comes into play because when I mean, it was just decades and decades and decades of people just adding. It's really, really sad that there's so many people who are kind of like opportunists and they use the vulnerable to just feel big about themselves, and and I mean this endless war again of oh, just get over it, like just get a job. Oh, you're an adult now, were things that people used to say to me. Never, literally, in my life. And of course, I used to have to pay to go to therapy out of my own pocket. It was like I was being left to clean up the mess of the abusers that they made. And it was normal. Like it was normal for the victim to have to pay to clean up the pollution I call abuse pollution. And then I'm like, oh my God, like all these things over the decades that I'm hearing about, you know, again, the BP oil disaster, that was like a long time ago. Exxon Valdez, that was even further ago than that. And then there was even, Chevron that polluted in the Ecuadorian Amazon from the 60s to the 90s. And again, being from Brooklyn, I would go, again, this is just not that many years ago when I was still living over there. I would go down to Southern District of New York, where Stephen Donziger, he was the civil rights attorney fighting for the rights of the Ecuadorian people in the Amazon against Chevron. Because and I used to see these when I was learning about this stuff, I was like, oh my God, this is exactly like the abusive family system on this like macro level, and of course I'm always on the side of the people. Stephen Donziger, who's fighting for the Ecuadorian people, who literally had this like Rhode Island, state of Rhode Island, like sludge dumped in the Ecuadorian Amazon, and they're all getting sick from it. And so, in going to the court, where Stephen Donziger was the one, this is how insane the system and how much impunity the abusers get. That like I'm learning as the decades are going by. Roger Waters always used to come too, so he was always there. Greg Palast, the journalist, was always there. Susan Sarandon, trying to remember who else. And so essentially the Southern District of New York was all in the pocket of Chevron. And they actually put Stephen Donziger, he was under house arrest for, 2 years, and then they put him away, not for very long, this place in Danbury, Connecticut. And so it like then it's like, oh my God, like there's all of these patterns of making the truth tellers the victims, sorry, the abusers, the bad guys, trying to frame the ones that are exposing the abusers and making them the guilty ones. And this is why I mean, like, if people like continue to live in a world where you can make the most innocent and vulnerable people guilty and frame them as being the bad guy that people did, to me since 1970, then like we're literally done as a society and as a world. I mean, standing up for the most innocent and vulnerable should, like, that's how nature and health go. And again, so people had this, oh, America's so great back, oh, like there's so much abundance, so we can just make messes, we could just pillage our child's health, and they're just so resilient. Oh, kids are resilient. So it was this really clear disconnect people had from the true cost and the true economy, from the fake economy that is the fiat system, you know, and right, like, it started to become so clear. Like, I'm telling you, like, I figured this system out really a long time ago. I knew the monetary system was utterly fraudulent. And, and it was so obvious that you had to give up your health mentally, physically, and spiritually. It was normal for people to give up their health to just go to work and have a job and get like a paycheck. And I tell you, it literally used to scare the hell out of me. And how people, they weren't trying to be self-actualized and get paid to do that. They were basically just kind of, whatever you had to do to get money. And, and you know, and it just really made me feel like, in my case, if I didn't build my, it's kind of like this muscle to fat ratio. Like, if you don't build, having enough muscle kind of burns the fat. And if because I had such horrible self-worth in the 80s and the 90s. I had utter horrific self-esteem, and I was like, how am I supposed to negotiate my worth in the world and know how, like I always knew money needed to be aligned with health. You have to be healthy first and then have money. If you're not healthy in mind, body, and spirit, and you have money, all you're going to be doing is using your money sickly and to weaponizing money in the world, and because I was kind of foolish too. Like, I thought people would have been able to really clearly understand this stuff. Like, I guess I maybe I just gave the people, like, too much credit. Like, but then, I mean, because like I was always trying to set the bar higher, and don't sell out your authentic self actualize, get paid to be self actualized, so it was kind of interesting because so like I'm just going through the years, and so I did personal training, and I also be like I became a in the 90s emergency medical technician for the New York City Fire Department, and I already had so much psych learning, before that. And like right when I joined, the fire department merged with emergency medical services. It used to be separate, and then they merged in around 1993. 3 or 4, and I was doing like a private ambulance first and then joined with the New York City Fire Department in like 93 or 94. And I could see how dysfunctional, I could just see how dysfunctional everything was. And you can respond. So from like the early 90s to like 2000, NYPD and FDNY could respond to, these neighborhoods in, East New York, uh, Brownsville, Brooklyn, like, like more, like, yeah, you used to work in like the really oppressed neighborhoods. And you will never see an improvement. Like you'll never see the neighborhood improve. So the one thing, again, the gift that fitness gave to me, and why I was like obsessed with fitness, was because, when you align with the laws of nature and health, it doesn't lie to you. Like if you do the right thing, eat right, exercise, over time, you will see change. You will see improvement, you'll see the before and the after, like not like going to a job for decades and decades and see no change, you'll just see, so like, because it was because of people around me denying the reality, instead of just acknowledging that the family system was dysfunctional, acknowledging that it was just an unhealthy environment. And then once you do that, we'll be able to take steps in the right direction. Again, I didn't think that was just such rocket science, but all people did was keep perpetuating an endless cycle. And it was kind of driving me crazy, like when I was young. And so fitness at least helped me to know that I was moving in the right direction. And, and I kind of started seeing also during FDNY that it was the same thing. All it was doing was perpetuating an endless cycle. People were just, they had no interest. Like I wanted to see change. Like, I'm like, hey, if we should be seeing improvement in these neighborhoods. And it was kind of sad, seeing the sort of spiritual deprivation in the neighborhoods. And you and another thing that was so we would respond to like certain calls that were what you could call like sudden and violent calls. But then there was also the sort of gradual deterioration of neighborhoods over time, you know and I kind of thought about this, and then I learned about like, and which became one of my favorite quotes by James Madison, that I pretty much memorized, that goes, I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by those in power by slow and gradual encroachments than by sudden and violent usurpations, or something to that effect. And because I used to be able to see that it was like the slow and gradual was really like more threatening than the sudden and the violent, because the sudden and the violent, like that's not confusing, that's kind of like right there. And I think that that's why I was one of the people that got jerked awake kind of early, because it was sudden and violent for me. It wasn't as slow and gradual as it is for other people, which is the boiling frog thing. And so like I was just so adamant about like dotting I's, crossing T's, doing the math, figuring everything out. And I like, after a while of doing um FDNY, I just felt like I couldn't be a part of just getting a paycheck off of and perpetuating the miseries of these people. Again, I was just like a ridiculous idealist, and I really did, think the world was better than that, and then I could do really better, and maybe focus more on holistic, and or pursue more holistic avenues, which I kind of was already studying, and I didn't expect it, to be that way. Like I didn't expect, like so many people are really just there for a paycheck. Like they were not interested in truly seeing any changes in these neighborhoods. And so then I left EMS in 2000. I did personal training, and then in 2001, I ended up going to this place in Rhinebeck, New York, called the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies, which was, it was okay, like the first season. And then you can kind of see the cracks in the walls, and the sort of, and I'm not like blaming anybody, because I could imagine it's very difficult being true to the mission, and having the funds, like, it's very easy for people to water down the mission to to have the fundage. And so like for, I don't know, about a decade, I was there from like 2001 until early 2004. I kind of lived a little bit like a nomad. I spent like 6 months in the UK, and um, just always looking for healthy environments, for a place where I can kind of receive. Like you never get to receive, no, and it's like you're just kind of getting more and more into debt. So I'm just gonna refer to my notes here. Yeah, so like, the attack on our health, and to put our and keep us in like a health deficit, started to become like really apparent. And I was really truly a firm believer in like the mind body connection, because one of the things, I mean, I learned yoga in the early 80s at the gym, but I learned, it got more knowledge, and was figuring things out. Like I think yoga practice is completely genius, because it's all about doing poses, positions, roles in life that you can only do with in integrity. So if you can't, touch your toes, that's okay. You can't touch your toes. You can, you know, just bend as far as you can bend, and then you breathe, and then you cultivate. Like yoga is like farming. You're essentially cultivating, and then you're also like letting all of like the parts of ourselves. This is was like one of the most kind of like, I thought it was pretty obvious, like this is what was happening. Again, I wasn't sure how prevalent it was back in the day, but like, so I was aware that vital parts of myself, emotionally, were being like pathologized, like very healthy parts of myself, healthy anger, healthy spiritedness, the fact that you want to and have a right to grow to your healthy potential. Like if you weren't walking around like, completely pulverized into submission, like you were literally a criminal, or and pathologized, like there was something wrong with you. And John Bradshaw used to refer to it as like holding a beach ball underwater, and how people are like going through this life holding vital parts of themselves, like being shamed for, having healthy anger or fear or sadness or, like even just like good, self-confidence, and I feel it even to this day. It's, how much of a prison like that I could completely see, psychologically, that I'm so used to living in a very, small space. And I see the way other people kind of maybe act more out in the open and freer, and this whole kind of relationship economy that goes on, and like, right, like your health economy that basically is getting taught at an early age that you're here to take the debt for your abusers and bail out your abusers, like with the, again, the real economy, and then also the fake economy. Yeah, that's from John Bradshaw's Healing the Shame That Binds You book. um right, where like so many people really do live as a false self, like the white larger figure is like, the false indoctrinated self that people kind of, learn to live as, while their healthier true self kind of learns to shrink, more and more over time. um, I don't know if you wanted to put the map picture up on that one. And this is where I know I'm like stepping on a lot of toes, but like I know this stuff like the back of my hand. I mean, seriously, like there is no question about it that what's been happening. I've done a lot of interviews with people about Palestine, like like over like more than a decade. Christopher Bolin.com, BOLLYN.com. He was an Israel Palestinian journalist even before like 9/11 and things like that. So I used to have him on, and he's got to be saying something because YouTube would take all of my interviews with him down. So this map of Palestine is exactly like, the diagram that you just had up of John Bradshaw. When I first saw this map of Palestine, I was like, wow, it's exactly like the 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 diagram from John Bradshaw's book about. And then, and yeah, I mean, if you look, it's like incredibly exact, micro and macro, so what's happening, this, it's the same that, like, so the same thing that happened to me, the same thing that happens to so many people. It's a land grab. Child abuse is a land grab. And healthy boundaries, like I was like obsessed with healthy boundaries, like people learning, knowing where you end and other people begin, what you are and aren't like responsible for. And it's become so normal, like over the decades, for and like I'm kind of like really blown away even to this day with the amount of people who are basically like occupied. And I mean, like, I wasn't using the words occupation like in the 80s, the 70s, or the 90s, or the early 2000s. Like, to describe, what John Bradshaw would talk about, and just like having our boundaries like completely violated. But it's become, so normal, for like children to just be owned, to have, for them to have their boundaries and rights just like completely violated, and to be like indoctrinated and occupied to do the bidding of the establishment at the expense of their true self. And even people like, the IDF, who are doing all the bidding, like they're like all the Israelis are like or Zionists, whatever you want to call them,
Mhm.
are being indoctrinated to hate Arabs, like it's literally like when they're children, and so that's what I'm saying. Like, that's child abuse. That is taking, healthy, authentic, unique children and polluting them essentially to have them doing the bidding of the establishment and carry out and like we were all, even in the United States, like, for decades, there's the same thing. Like, you're just being indoctrinated to do the bidding of your, masters again, like at the expense, of yourself and against your own interests, and when I heard Occupy Wall Street, talking about, banks got bailed out, the people got sold out, I was like, hey, I was like, seriously, like it's like the macro of the dysfunctional abusive family system. I mean, it's like I knew when I was young. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, people are telling me and making excuses. Oh, well, like, oh, always saying to me things like, oh, well, your parents did the best they could. And, like I'm supposed to be understanding of my abuser, who never had to apologize, never had to take responsibility, never had to do anything to make up, to, right, like, admit what they did or to do better or anything, or to pay back, and, any robbing that they did, nothing, and yet I was always being told, oh, well, the poor abuser. And then I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? Just keep forgiving, like, while they just keep pulverizing me? I mean, and being by yourself as a young person, and there's like literally, like, I mean, this is not complicated. I mean, this is like a simple matter of like math and science, and the fact that your mind body just simply cannot afford to be bailing out and funding, your abusers. Like, this is just, all you got to do is just look close and do a little bit of math, and it's not that complicated. Children cannot afford their health, cannot afford, to do this. And by people always saying, oh, oh, well, your parents, they couldn't raise you good because nobody taught them, as if, again, like, it always goes back to math and science. So, like, for whatever reason that, parents can't do a good job, it doesn't ever change the math and the science. The math and the science are always going to say children need this, children need that, mentally, physically, and spiritually, and that's it. If any of those things get screwed up, there are consequences, and it's like that simple, period, end of story. It's non-negotiable, and it was obvious, again, in yoga, that they used to talk about, oh God, don't get me. I'm like, lost my train. Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry. Um, so like they used to say, like, up at the Omega Institute, like the mind can make up whatever it wants. And I was like, yeah, like you could say that again. Like that's how people literally lived since 1970. Like, they just like decapitated people, living from the neck up, making up whatever they want. And I started kind of using this term that I call fiat words, any kind of words that are not connected to reality, or just, fiat words. Like, I started to really believe, like, everything that we say that comes out of our mouths, mind body connection, should be connected to some kind of reality, to some kind of math and science. Like, um, again, like when I was young, this was just like, it's unbelievable how insane this world is, like, has become, because, you know, like, like I was always doing the math. Like I was always doing the research, and I was determined to get to the bottom of things and understand things because I knew that I was right. And yet no matter how much I had the math and the science right, no one would ever acknowledge it and say, Catherine, you're right. Like I was always treated like, you're just a nobody, that like you have no rights, no credit. Like like no matter how much research that I did and facts and proof that I had, people who did no research, who did nothing, but just come along with their fiat words would just say, and like think that they're just gonna like overpower me who actually like had the math and the science right, and I used to say, again, decades ago, like, wait a minute. Isn't when you want the truth, isn't it evidence that you turn to? When people go to like, and go to court, is, like don't you prove like your case by turning to facts, by turning to math, by turning to science? Like, isn't that kind of how you get to the truth? Like you turn to like the laws of nature. And yet no matter how many times I did that, it just never mattered. And I used to feel like when I was 8 years old, I used to feel like I had to be my own lawyer. I had to be my own private investigator. I had to be like my own, whatever, yeah, like private eye, to basically prove my own case and prove that I was innocent, because everybody's around you is trying to make you out to be the guilty bad one. And so this is basically how I know the issue of Israel against Palestine, because all it is the macro of the micro. And it's just an abusive relationship on a mass scale. It's not complicated at all, and it's just like the more vulnerable population just being abused. And like I've done so many interviews with people. Like I did a lot of interviews when I used to work with during Occupy Wall Street, this guy Danny Schechter, the news dissector. I used to produce his show on a progressive radio network, the on 83rd Street and Broadway in New York City. And then he passed away in 2015. And then I used to do awakeradio.us, and then after that peoplesinternetradio.com. And I interviewed a bunch of times, the math coder, NSA whistleblower William Binney, like he basically confirmed. And I also used to interview a lot. And I guess I should say this, I'm trying not to be all over the place, but so John Perkins, I also interviewed a bunch of times, and he wrote a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And if you read that book is a clear macro of how the dysfunctional, abusive, family system and community. I mean, it's all just abuse. Again, it's just in different sizes, in different systems. The family community being like the most kind of scaled down, and then of course your bodily system being like scaled down even more. And so John Perkins, in Confessions of an Economic Hitman, would write about the history of the United States and its coups, its coup d'etats, of other countries around the world, in Iran, and places in Latin America, where uh, the U.S. would try to corrupt leaders of other countries, like under the guise of building things that would be for the benefit of the people, like water filtration or things like that. But what the US really wanted was the country's resources. And so it would try to corrupt the leaders of these countries to get them to play ball with the US to set up, things like water filtration that would only end up making like a few rich, so-called rich people richer and leave the people holding, not only the financial debt, but also the pollution and the environmental devastation. And so when I read his book, and because he was at the Omega Institute, when I was there, he was giving workshops on like indigenous cultures, because while he was an economic hitman, he dealt a lot with indigenous cultures, and he kind of befriended a lot of indigenous people. And so I didn't know he was the economic hitman when I was at the Omega Institute. But anyway, so yeah, like he said he wrote that book after 9/11 happened, and he kind of knew that he had to tell the story. And so and then William Binney, also the NSA whistleblower, was just basically saying the same thing on a larger scale as well. Like, it's like it's all a fraudulent system. I mean, it's clearly like it's John Perkins, who wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He would call what we live in a death economy. So he was pretty much like confirming stuff that I already sort of knew like decades earlier. Like, something is just like so clearly wrong. And by continuing to perpetuate the fiat that was like removed from I mean, like, it's up for debate whether or not fiat backed by gold or whatever and things like that. But clearly, uh in order for the monetary system to be legitimate, it needs to be aligned with something of value that nature makes. Um, what, so that right, the psychos that be can't just be able to remove fiat from being backed by something that could keep it anchored. And they don't want that, because then they won't be able to just kind of do whatever they want. You have to remove something from being in alignment with the laws of nature, so that the deviants can deviate the monetary system even more, and just keep taking things further and further out of alignment, which is kind of like what woke me up and just made me like obsessed with fitness, and then even yoga practice, which is all about being in alignment. If we can't acknowledge, see, this is what's really scary about yeah, you could put the other, yeah. So if we can't acknowledge being out of alignment, and actually call being out of alignment, and knowing that you need to move more back into alignment, and if being so deviant and misaligned is normal, then like that's what I'm saying. Like, right, like, over these decades, people are just going to keep going further and further, like, out of alignment. And it's pretty much like that's what's happened. Like, just when I thought, like, I was kind of helping people to find alignment, and come into and acknowledge when things are out of alignment. But what's kind of unfortunate is that, see, because the the monetary system really, unfortunately, over time, has, like, it wants people to be, of course, health wise out of alignment. And that's what I mean. It's like we can't just kind of keep following the death dollar, and letting it take us more, like, out, further and further out of alignment. um and we need to have the dollar. I mean, I don't, see, I don't know if this is ever going to happen in my lifetime, but so anyway, like what you have up, this is what I kind of study. This is what I believe. I believe in like it's basically Eastern medicine, Ayurveda. And it's really hard. The words are really hard to see. So, but what I'm just gonna like refer to is there are charts like this that show the emotions, and when the chakras are out of alignment and people's emotions are either in a deficiency or in an excess. Like, I really thought people were learning this. I thought this stuff was going to take off, and it's pretty kind of straightforward that when some people are excessive in their emotions, see, like, this is why it's important for the little guy, us little guys, to like own like all of ourselves again. So like John Bradshaw used to talk about like, right, like all of your parts, like own all of your parts. Your healthy anger, your healthy sadness, your healthy sexuality, your healthy spiritedness, because the parts of ourselves that we're taught to cut off and like submerge within ourselves, they kind of get expressed by the people around us. Like Barbara DeAngelis used to say this, like she always would say, like, tell the truth in, in the family system, because if you repress, your anger, like your kid will feel it, and start expressing, your anger. Like, it's just kind of, how things work. And so, right, like if we're not owning our power and like giving it away, and like the psychos that be are just nothing but the people projecting their power onto them, and all the people have to do really is just to take it back and own their power. But it's I'm kind of not really sure like why they're not doing it, or like Stockholm syndrome. And me and Jamie did a good recording the other day about the true story Girl in the Box that happened in 1977, of a 19-year-old in coming from Oregon down into the northern part of California, and got kidnapped from the age of 19 until like almost the age of 27. And like like her head was kept in a box, and then she lived in like a larger kind of coffin box. And like, so me and Jamie were trying to basically focus on, because like what the kidnapper Cameron Hooker was trying to do, again, is just like turn her into a slave, turn her into like a sex slave. The wife that he had before he kidnapped this girl, Colleen Stan, was also a slave. And so, right, like, how you can just take a person and literally train them to like love their abuser. Like, I was just always so fascinated with psych and trauma, and Stockholm syndrome, and the Milgram experiment. So, essentially, like, right, like all the chakras, like the most lower chakras are all about like survival, and as go up, to the top one, I mean, right, that's supposed to be like self-actualization. The pineal gland that's right behind like our eyes is a very important, gland that, like, with pollution and all the contaminated foods, the powers that be like really want to sort of, turn these things off so that, people kind of forget who they are. But we're clearly getting to a climax in the world where I mean, I really don't know how this is going to play out, but it's certainly um, it's certainly going to be come to a head. Um, yeah, like to start, I guess, like delving into, the whole Satanism thing, because um I mean, like I guess, like I'm gonna just kind of like maybe like use like terms like satanic and sick almost like interchangeably, because I really believe that, ill, sick, deviant, inverted, like all of those things, are synonymous with satanic. And like I always believed that that God was health and fitness, like being our most healthy and fit mentally, physically, and spiritually. Like I kind of thought, again, that that's a no-brainer, that that is God, like that is us being as close to God. Like I was never really like, I mean, I did go to Catholic elementary school, but I never considered myself religious. I never considered myself Catholic. Like to me, fitness, it was a no-brainer, that just being as healthy and fit as you can, being as aligned, it's like a no-brainer that like a great like surfer or rock climber, I mean, like that is being truly close to God, the more aligned that you can be with, natural law, and then you kind of get into that zone, like that is clearly like, so, doing like a handstand, when I was like, with yoga, like learning how to do, like pretty, some difficult poses, whatever. I always had like lower back problems. So handstand, like was challenging, but like, once you can hold a handstand and like that's, it's like amazing, to be able to do fitness and to have mastery over your mind body, and to be able to utilize and live to your full capacity. Like that just kind of was like, this is really like a no-brainer. And I'm just let me just say this too. And things that I might say might offend people, and but again, it's okay, because one of the things that was really obvious during the course of my life was how much, like, people not only were just unfit mentally, physically, and spiritually, but they hated fitness because it would expose how unfit and how misaligned they were. And instead of just acknowledging that they were misaligned and just coming towards alignment, again, like, they just have a war with, nature. Like, so again, just, I just use the Israel Palestine again, just to sort of macrofy the micro of, the child abuse, because it's literally exactly the same thing. Like the system just needs to manufacture enemies, terrorists, children get labeled as, acting out bad behavior, to, just like, I mean, it's just so obvious. Like I swear to God, sometimes like I just don't understand, like how it just keeps getting worse. Because like there's no way that innocent children can be guilty or can be ill. Um, they tried to like uh almost say that children are born, like murderers or something, and there's no way. I mean, it's just a way of scapegoating. It's just a way of the leaders not taking any responsibility and just pawning it all off to to the most innocent. I mean, there, and so I'm trying to just like I'm scanning things in my mind and just trying to figure out like which to land on. So I guess I mentioned William Binney, the NSA whistleblower that I interviewed a bunch of times, kind of met him a bunch of times in New York. There was a filming, Sean Stone was there of the documentary A Good American, William Binney and like three other whistleblowers exposing the fact that like he had created a program, you know, oh like again like oh we're looking for terrorists and terrorist activity online. And so William Binney was the one who invented like safeguards to privatize information, metadata of the people to to maintain their privacy. And of course the NSA kind of stole his thing and stripped it of all of the protections that he had put in, so that they could just basically spy on Americans, and under the guise of like oh that they're looking for terrorism and stuff. And so like this is what I'm saying, like I always just want to go back to the family system and healthy boundaries and how healthy relationships are supposed to function at the most scaled down level. Because if you don't understand how healthy relationships are supposed to function at the most scaled down level, you're just going to tolerate like so much abuse and so much like, rights violations of yourself when you're older. And, it really is truly, truly sad. And again, like, people might find what I'm going to say like offensive, but that's okay, because if you don't get if you're not willing to be uncomfortable, and you have to be willing to admit that you're not well in order to move towards better health and fitness. And so if you're just going to deny, because this is what people did for 50 years already, like like I did self-improvement my entire life. I mean, am I like the only one that needs to improve? Am I the only one that like thinks that I could stand like room for improvement while everybody else, like is walking around like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with me. I got a job. I'm a good citizen, and but yeah, but you're not self-actualized, but you're not stepping up, for the vulnerable. You're not protecting the vulnerable. You're scapegoating the vulnerable. You're not functioning at, the most optimum level of like health and fitness, and so like most people, like they might just shoot for a really low bar in life. And, I can't make people want to be fit. Like, I really do believe a lot of people don't want to be fit. They don't want to, especially mentally. Physically was hard enough. I mean, it was, again, I watched, decades ago, people never ever make time for health and fitness. When I tell you nothing was getting in the way of me going to the gym, like ever. It was what I was doing, like always, and nothing came first. Like, because my health suffered so much, I knew, mentally and physically, and the gym helped me so much that there was nothing that was going to keep me. And there's something severely sick in the world if it's going to have a problem with me taking care of my health. Like something is wrong around here, and it's just become so normal over the decades, for people themselves to be the ones themselves to just chip away at their own, especially like spiritual health. And I used to watch people, like it was always normal for your health to suffer for a job, for people to just get more out of shape over time, for people to just get overweight over time. The older people got, the more overweight they would get, like I'd go to, when I did go to family functions again decades ago, I don't anymore. All of my family, like they were all getting larger, like the years going by. And me, I'm like doing all the fitness, like I'm getting fitter and they're all getting fatter. But of course, they got more money than me and more materialism than me, of course. But I kind of believe that if I just stayed on this track, that someday, again, it turned out to be much harder than I thought it was going to be. But, you know, I just didn't think that it was really um, radical to be healthy. And then, you hear the term self-determination being used for the people in Palestine. And I was like, wow, well, that sounds kind of a lot like the self-actualization that I even kind of knew that I wasn't living, since this 1970, and it's so easy to put this together. Anybody that tries to make Israel Palestine out to be complicated, I never really hear anybody paralleling Israel Palestine with child abuse. I do it all the time, just calling the Palestinian, it's just an abusive relationship. That's all it is. Making the victim out to be the aggressor, making the victim out to be the abuser, because, people did it to me my entire life, so it's not complicated. People do it to children all the time. Make people having healthy adverse responses to, being blown off the face of the earth and having their land stolen. So, again, like the child abuse is exactly the same thing as the land grab, like that's been happening, over in Palestine over decades. It's once someone is abused, especially as a child, the occupier moves in, and the true person is like this little itty bitty thing, maybe having some awareness, maybe not having any awareness and functioning fully, like I get MK Ultra can completely just, turn a whole person into like not even being occupying any sense of themselves at all, which is like terrifying, you know? And so yeah, mind body, people hate fitness because it shows them how unfit they are. And no one is saying that people have to be like, some kind of a super person. All I ever really hoped for was that people would at least move in the direction of better health and fitness mentally, physically, and spiritually. Because at least then, just be committed to that, because that's like the map. That's how you stay oriented, tune in, listen within, spend time in quiet, mindfulness. Like I was really taking very seriously like mindfulness practice and just being in the present moment, really feel a chair underneath you, or like if you're doing dishes, really feel the water, really feel the dish and the soap or anything that you're doing, just slow down and be present with it, because the present moment breaks the vicious cycle. It was you have past, present, and future, and most people are not in the present moment. So then all you just end up with is that vicious cycle. So you're really like not moving anywhere. You have to have the present moment and say, hey, and acknowledge like the reality and the dysfunction and the unpleasantness for what it is. If you're going to move out of a debt or out of an illness, you need to acknowledge the reality. You can't just like kick it down the road. You can't deny it. It's like the laws of nature aren't going to really oblige, and so again, like I just it's pretty it's pretty simple and basic, that it's like a man-made system versus the laws of nature and health. And you know and people really did, unfortunately, like follow, man. And I I could understand, the Stockholm syndrome. I could understand, um it's not easy to acknowledge when people in authority are the abusers. But during COVID and then the rollout of the jab, because all of this stuff like was sounding just more and more and more macro of the micro, and so when people were saying, "Oh, I got injured by the jab. I got this by the jab. I got a seizure disorder." And for me to be telling people that I was injured, like living in my own house, like, starting 5 decades ago, and the same thing was happening to people who were claiming to be injured by the jab. Like they were being treated like they were crazy because, again, it's uncomfortable. Like, oh, it can't possibly be big pharma that's like poisoning you on purpose. So you must be crazy. It must all be in your head. All the same things that I like, and not just me, but like billions of people, abused, like not as children, but since. There's a big difference between being like because most people abused when they're children are abused since they're children. It doesn't end, when they're not a child anymore. And so unfortunately, the world is like really reaping what it is sown. The one thing that was just easy to see was how the abusers were excused and enabled. The abusers were excused and enabled, and the truth teller was always the criminal. So if you do that for 5+ decades, it's not really hard to understand how the world ended up being where it is. So just going back to the jab and people getting injured by the jab. So right, it's like I started calling it like our psych immune system. So right, I like it, it was our mental and emotional and psychological immune systems, like I like what happened to me, that was being under attack. And once your mind body is having those healthy adverse experiences to a very unhealthy environment, and people are making your healthy adverse responses wrong, that is a clear dismantling of your immune system, physically, mentally, and spiritually, and making people get weaker and weaker over the decades. Like I was trying to get people to get strong. Like people would have been like way stronger over the decades. I was trying to help people to be stronger mentally, physically, and spiritually over the decades, stepping up to the plate and acknowledging, I mean, I know that some of the stuff is so unpleasant, especially when people are young. Well, it was unpleasant for me when I was young, but I had no choice but to, like face it, while everybody else around me, didn't. And had they, see, that's what I mean. People could have been literally psychologically building their psych immune system and getting stronger and stronger over the decades and be really, really strong by now. and and not fall for all of this stuff that the psychos that be are unleashing. So, like, again, like one of the things that, like, one of the parts of health, um I knew at a young age that health is not just physical, it's psychological and spiritual. I thought that was like fairly becoming like common, and yet, um, it's this sort of stagnation that the system is, where the powers that be like are always up here. They always occupy like the upper tiers, and us people, like, we're always down here. Like, we can't breach up here, unless, I guess you're willing to like sacrifice a couple of kids and break into the satanic cult thing there, and that's kind of really unfortunate, like, that we can't be healthy and self-actualize, and because I mean it, naturally, right, like new human beings, children being born into the world, I mean, they're supposed to grow, right, reach their healthy potential. They're supposed to replace the people in these upper tiers. They're supposed to get cleaned out and be, cleared out and replaced by healthy and clean people. And it was always obvious, like when I had jobs, like, hey, again, I'm the young person coming in looking to freshen this place up. And instead of that happening, no, like, you just get polluted with all the old sludge that's like been here, decades before me, And I was always just like, come on, like, this system is just so blatantly ill, and going in the complete opposite direction that nature and health go. And it's just been so normalized that people just, they're so disoriented and they just don't even know it, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I love that you make all these comparisons because it really does overlap when you look at, say, the tendencies of a psychopath and the cause and effect of that on an innocent being, that interaction of the victim and the abuser. It really can overlay so well in so many different facets of society. But like you said, because we've gotten so far away from understanding trauma and health, the two different, ends of the paradigm, we don't even know when we're being abused anymore because we've just accepted that as part of life, that, oh, the government, does all these things. These leaders are toxic. Like you said, we're being led by a bunch of very unhealthy beings. And we're so used to being around other unhealthy beings around us. And a lot of us are, very unhealthy ourselves, that it just becomes this like, we're not replenishing, like you said, we're not bringing in something new to replace what's old. We're bringing in more toxicity to replace toxicity. And it's just like this never ending cycle. And then when there are people like you said, you're sort of the, black sheep that's working for an organization or in a family. You become the outcast and the thing that's not understood, even though what you're doing should be common knowledge, like you said, like the health and vitality of our being should be something that is praised in society and something that is sought after. And instead, I'm just on like a micro version. I'm sure whenever you were going on your fitness journey and getting healthy and detoxing yourself from all the different layers of trauma, spiritually, physically, emotionally, then people even start treating you bad and weird from that aspect. Oh, you're not going to eat pizza anymore with us? Well, you're no fun. Oh, you're not going to go get drunk with us every night? Well, you're really weird. And all of a sudden, like, you become this outcast, even though people should be like, wow, that's really amazing that you're taking control of your life. That's admirable. I want to follow in your footsteps and learn from you. Right. And so we see that duplicating in society with all these different abuse kind of cycle versions of what we just talked about on a micro scale, like on a macro, and people can't even recognize that they're in these different abuse situations or abusive relationships, whether it be with a government or a leader or whatever it is, because
Mhm.
we're just so used to like being surrounded by toxicity. So it's so interesting how you talk about all of this because it really is like the foundation of everything wrong in our society is child abuse, is that toxicity. It's that lack of vitality and fitness on all those different levels that you preach and know so well. And if we opted to all get healthy and become fit in all these different ways, like you said, it doesn't take a lot either. There was something that always stuck with me. I think somebody wrote a book called like 1% better a day, right? Like you don't have to go 100% like from 0 to 100. Like just look to do 1% every day. Like our goal should be to grow instead of staying stagnant. And I think if we all did that, it would root out a lot of the problems, and it's not going to happen overnight. But like you said, like if parents took care of themselves, it would teach children how to do the same. And then we could replace unhealthy with healthy, but we've just gotten so far away from that it's like you said, whenever you're criminalized for having a perfectly normal response to an unhealthy environment or situation, and this is so important what you're talking about. And I love that like you never gave up talking about this, because I'm sure that there were so many times where you're like, screw it, I don't even need to do this anymore. Like I'm just going to work on myself. And I just want to commend you for all your hard work, because you are heard, and this community really needs people like you to educate us again. Society needs voices like you to help bring us back, because people are slowly waking up to this. They're so lost in what trauma is, and abuse and psychopathy and even healing. We've gotten so far away from like learning these different things and even realizing that we're in these different toxic environments. So, I'm really proud of you and inspired by you for this journey that you've gone on, and for all the ways that you've been able um, to articulate this, in so many different layers. So thank you for everything that you've done, and for continuing to speak out despite all the different ways that you've had obstacles come before you to try to keep you from talking about this.
Thank you, Emma. Again, I'm not like really used to getting complimented. Like, I'm so kind of used to like, because I swear to God, like I've been criminalized, and to this day, I struggle feeling like a criminal, like you're doing something wrong. And even in the world that we're living in today, like they really do like want to more and more criminalize people for telling the truth. And like it's just so important for people to know just what it means to just be a healthy person, to just be a healthy adult in mind, body, and spirit. I know that it's not easy. I gotta admit, I mean, I kind of do get like, mad today when I hear people saying things that like I got criminalized for saying. Like I was never allowed to point fingers at abusers, even when I was a kid, So for me to this day to hear like people that are supposed to be adults, blaming, oh, the government or big pharma or this one or that one. I was like, I was never even allowed to, be a victim and blame my parent or anybody when I was a kid. Like I was never seen as a victim ever. Like all people would do is just, oh, just get over it. Oh, you're an adult now. Oh, I mean, just this endless, like the ignorance, especially to just emotional health. Like it really, I hate to say, but it kind of really worries me, the mangling job. So, like that's what I'm saying. If big pharma and people are going to say, oh, big pharma is messing your health, or the DuPont and its PFOA all over the world. Well, if people can't even understand, the health mangling, the emotional butchering that really takes place in the family system. I mean, if you don't even have a safe, loving space in the family system when you're a child, and have, people, healthy adults that are truly capable of being on your side and defending you and fighting like warriors for you and having your back. I mean, parents and other adults to a child in the community, they should be like warriors. They should be like mother bears ready to rip anybody who messes with their kid to shreds. But instead, it's like, the family system and parenting like I just started thinking of it as like the blood-brain barrier. So no matter how psycho even the government or big pharma or anybody is, if parents were doing their job, like they would be protecting and able to defend, their child. But it again, it just gets so normal for like even the parent to be seen as this like victim of big pharma. If big pharma can bypass the blood-brain barrier of parenting to get to the kid, or any corporation or government or bank can bypass the blood-brain barrier to get to the kid through the parent, guess what, folks? That's a sign that you're weak. You got to just look at the facts. As uncomfortable as the facts and the math are, you have to acknowledge the reality, and and admit it, and then just take steps to counter it. And that's it, It really shouldn't be that complicated, But when people, all my life, people get, oh, excuses, emotions. People get so emotionally triggered, you know, rather than just going by the math, rather than just going by the science and the facts. People get emotionally triggered, and then, oh, but that's it. Like the minute people get emotionally triggered and they go off on these tangents, that's the minute that you're just like gone. You got to always come back into alignment, come back to the facts, come back to the science, and the fitness, and that's it. Like, meditation is all about training, using your breath, again, training to be in the present moment. And this stuff is not easy, believe me. Noticing when your mind wanders, noticing when your decapitated mind is just going to try to make up whatever it wants, and then you just bring it back and you screw it back onto your head and to the reality and to the math. And that's it. And you just keep doing that over and over and over and over and over. I mean, but at this point, it's like such a late place for people to be starting now, because this, the psychos that be, they have a lot of leverage by now. And, like they're definitely looking to depopulate, looking to God knows what their, agenda. It's not good. That's for sure.
100%. And I would love to have you back on actually, because not only do I have more questions for you, but I think it'd be really fun almost to take those three paradigms and we can even add more, the physical, the mental slash emotional, and the spiritual. And maybe we could do a whole episode on how people can take their power back in all those different little categories. And we can have, an episode like solely focused on how people can, overcome these barriers that we've gotten so far from.
And
Um,
don't be afraid to be alone, Like
yeah.
never be afraid to be alone. Like, I know people want to belong to the crowd and they want to, I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I would just start noticing. I was starting to just notice. I'm just going to say this one part that was so like one of the earlier signs and symptoms when I was with the fire department of someone going into a state of shock was altered mental status. You would have to ask them their name, where they are, what day is it, to just kind of see like if they were bleeding out, if they had an arterial bleed or like an anaphylactic shock. And what scares me very much is that altered mental status has almost become like a normal, impaired state for people to be living in now, because, maybe it wasn't an arterial bleed or shock that's making, people go into shock, but it's they've been so depleted of their health and their energy. They're in like a hypo volume of of energy, that they're literally walking around in altered mental status. And once you're in a deficient state, all you can do is make more poor choices that just makes your condition spiral down that much deeper. And if we don't have really healthy people truly looking out for our best interest, and they're not just kind of looking to cash in on the fact that we're in a state of altered mental status, and they stop the bleeding and, elevate the limb so that we can actually be countered. See, the psychos that be, they want all of us just like, being like chickens without heads, like going around screwing one another over, to profit off of, so-called profit off of, your neighbor. And I mean, I don't know. I never wanted to live in that kind of a world. Like, I just wanted to like build healthy families and communities, have healthy relationship skills, hold a space for one another, mirror back. Like, this is all I ever wanted to do is just build health. That's it.
And that's what we need to do and to focus on, and like I said, sadly, so many people are so far from health and so far from having an understanding of even where to start that I think it would be so fun to like give people a blueprint of things that you've learned. And of course, not everything's going to apply to everybody, but once we learn about the dysfunction in the world, I always say the next step, once we learn what's going on, whether it's SRA, whether it's MK Ultra, whether it is how they've destroyed the family unit, big pharma. Once we learn about all of this, the next step is healing from it and learning how to undo it, and that's going to be the biggest journey of all is creating healthier environments that, through the generations to come can reverse that cycle and start creating and, manufacturing health instead of disease, So I'm really just honored to have you on, Kat, and lucky
I
for all of us, for people listening. You are all over social media. You even have your own
am.
show. And so I want you to just share where people can find you because I'm sure
Oh,
people are going to be like, oh man, I want to learn more from her.
so I get my main like archives from revolution.radio. They get put up on onegreatworknetwork.com. It's one great work network. I know it's a little bit of a tongue twister. And also I'm on X. I mean, I don't have like a lot of I kind of don't go by that. I don't have a lot of followers because I'm so used to being shunned, for telling the truth that oh yeah, that's my ex. And on One Great Work Network it's under creators, and then you just, yeah, scroll just a little bit, yeah, right there on the right. And you know I just give all the credit to the body like my body did it, my mind body did it. I didn't do it. It was my mind body that knew what to do, and I just kind of listened, as best as I could. Believe me, I'm not like, like I was just determined to not sell out. And not that long ago they had city workers in New York crossing over the Brooklyn Bridge and protesting against the mandated jabs. And it was kind of interesting because I was trying to get people to do that decades earlier, to set the bar higher, and, don't sell out your authenticity for a job, like never mind just fighting and, resisting against a mandated jab. And then people started saying like, oh, my body, my choice and bodily autonomy when it came to the jab. And I was like, you should have been saying that decades ago, with other, I just can't help it. Like, I've just been kind of holding the bar on like our health, like, trying to get people to hold it higher, instead of the lower you set the bar, on your health, then like that's how the psychos that be take the energy that belongs to us and they use it against us.
Amen, sister. And you have so much content, and it's not about the followers. If we change one life or get it to one person that it can help create an impact for, that's all that matters. And you are way ahead of your time with what you're talking about. This information is very outcasted right now because we've become so far away from health that I think as people start waking up to this and realize they've been fooled, you are just going to continue growing and growing and growing. And all the archives that you've created with all these videos are going to be seen by more and more people and sought out by more and more people. So,
I think you're helping. Thank you so much, Emma.
you're
Because
welcome.
again, like I don't really I do most of the interviewing. I hope to get interviewed more. People really need to listen. And I thank you for this. Getting people to listen to the victims. We live in this world, and I've felt it over the decades how you can't get to a place where people will listen to you and be established because there's no one to help you get established. And so you're always kind of caught in this catch 22. Like I've been caught in a catch 22 for so long where I'm like just looked down upon like you're just a nobody when no one is a nobody. Everyone, like really has the potential and like really smart person like kind of buried inside of them, and all they need is a little bit of help in cultivating, and then right, like people need to be helped in order to get established. It's like people don't listen to you until you're established, but they don't want to help you to get established.
100%. And people like you are helping build that foundation. Even if people don't realize that they need the work that you're doing, they will. And more people are going to seek that, and I can't wait to see you on more podcasts and for more people to see the incredible value in what you've been talking about and screaming for all these decades, just like a lot of these survivors that haven't been listened to and are slowly starting to be listened to now. And so you are on One Great Network, so I'm gonna have that. If people prefer, if you guys have, say, a Rumble premium account, or if you guys are paying for an ad-free YouTube subscription, she is on YouTube, she is on Rumble, she's on just about every platform, and you guys can find her different platforms on X where she has them listed. Also on One Great Network, right underneath her bio, and what her channel is about. She has a ton of different little links so you guys can connect with her very easily in one place. And I encourage you guys to. That's one of the greatest gifts that we can give whistleblowers and survivors and truth tellers is our support. It's free, it's really easy, and it gives you the opportunity now to educate on what you've learned. You can take this episode or any of her episodes and any of her content, and you can go share it with a friend. You can share it on your social media, and it's free. It doesn't take you any effort, and it can help educate other people and get the word out that there are people like Kat out here that are explaining things that a lot of people aren't talking about and doing it in a very palatable way, a way that embodies compassion and love, and in a way that is essentially being and embodying the spirit of a leader that, we don't have in the world and leaders that we ourselves needed as children. It's beautiful to see that you've grown into that, Kat.
Thank you.
So I am just really excited to have you back on. Hopefully soon we can do a part two and three and four and five. I'd love to have you on many times. I feel like this topic could just keep going and going and going with what we could talk about.
The
Um,
real currency comes from within. Like I just want to say that courage and guts is a currency that the people need to exercise more, and not really. I mean, like money, I feel like needs to be kind of kept in its place more because it's man-made, and anything man makes can't in no way, shape, or form outvalue anything that God makes, And so just value yourself more, exercise your inner currency, and, just value other people more, like especially the vulnerable and the abused.
yes, 100%. And just to add to that before we wrap up, a lot of people say money is evil. Money is, just the root of all evil. And in a lot of ways it is. But I also want to say too that money just makes people more of who they are. So if we hand money off to a bunch of very toxic, unhealed, unfit people, they're going to use that money in accordance to their personality and to those unfit and very toxic traits and personality um, qualities that they have. Where if we create a healthy society and we give very healthy, healed people resources and money, then we're going to see that allocated to things that embody health and that can help elevate society in a non-toxic way, you know? So as much as uh we want to get back to natural law, you know, I think that we can, but I also think that it's important that with man's law and what we have, that we're allocating these things to people that are healthy, because that's how we can start to get on the right track, you know, because right now we have a lot of unhealthy people managing the world's wealth and health, you know, and setting a really poor example for everybody else. So I couldn't agree more with you, Kat. And so for everybody listening, again, I'm going to have all of Kat's links below. If you guys have comments that you guys want to leave below or questions, go ahead. If you guys want to personally connect with her, please reach out via DM on any of her platforms. She also has her email up on her One Great Network. So you guys can go ahead and
One great work network. I know it's like a tongue
yeah, One
twister.
Great World Network. Yes. Sorry. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, that's exactly it. And so I'm going to have all of that below you guys. And again, the best thing that we can do is go support people like Kat and share their content. It's free, it's easy, and you know, it's a way that we can help make minuscule micro changes to help bring the macro to a healthier place. So I'm going to have all my links below as well, you guys. We couldn't do this without you. Thank you guys so much for listening. God bless you, and we will see you next time.